Today on the project Nomad, we finally work on the 3rd gen 4runner and actually add this ARB bumper to it. Before we start, please like, comment, and subscribe. Starting off the modification process for that 3rd gen 4runner that we have is this ARB bumper that we have here. This is a recent acquisition for us. We took it off of a totaled vehicle that was in an accident. The previous owner was parting out the rig and he was selling this ARB bumper for relatively cheap, so we decided to pick it up. And for the most part, this thing is in pretty good shape. With all that being said, the previous owner did cut off the hoops and the upper guard protection, which is kind of a sad thing for us because we really do like that upper protection. It provides a lot of protection to the hood, the grille, and the lights in case of any animal strikes or just in general off-roading. So it is a damn shame that that happened, but other than that, for the most part, the major damage that we saw for this bumper is that it only got a crack here and it has pushed in the panels right here on the driver's side of the bumper, but it's an easy repair for us. We're just going to cut it out and replace it with fresh paneling. But the other big thing that got damaged were these mounts here. They're a bit dirty because they were laying out in his yard and we just picked them up. These mounts were crushed because they are designed as crush cans from ARB, so that the bumper has some give, so that if you do have an impact like the previous owner had, they do crush and they don't give as much kinetic energy into the cab and into the person. So they did their jobs, but because of that they did warp and deflect. So we're gonna have to repair these, but I do have a very good idea on how to do it, and I'll show you that when we get there. But the first thing that we have to do is start getting this cut out and getting paneling ready for this. And the way that we're going to do that is on this side. This is a mirror copy of what the other side is supposed to look like. So we're going to get a template of this side matched up and cut out, and then flip it so that it is the mirrored version of this side, so we can patch it up onto there. So using some cardboard aided design, this is what we have right here. It provides a pretty decent copy and replica of the portion that we need to cut out, as well as a line to cut into so that we can bend it to the right shape. We took this template over here to this steel from the scrap steel that we have from a previous project, and we laid it out, but we had to flip it in order to get it correct. Otherwise this is not gonna line up correctly. I almost made the mistake of cutting this thing out when it was not mirrored, so that we would end up with just an exact copy of the previous side. But having stopped myself, this template was transferred onto the steel, and we're just going to cut this out right now. Having cut the patch panel out, this is off of scrap 3/16 steel that we have from a previous project, and basically we just cut it out off of the template that we made of the other side, and this is what we end up with. All I'm going to do now is cut the damaged portions out and then reinstate this and tack it in and then fully weld it up. But that's pretty much how I'm going to repair this bumper. It fits just like that. I can't get it to sit flush because the paneling is warped, but I'll be able to cut it off right now. Cutting off the panels is actually really easy. All you need to do is actually get it in the right position though. I cut out most of the paneling here Also the inner tubes that the previous guy didn't want to cut for some odd reason, even though he cut off the top tubes. But I got the panel cut out, and I have this one ready to fit just like this, more or less, something close to this. I'm just basically gonna tack it in place and then start spot welding sections so that I can weld up more and more of it, and then when the majority of it is tacked up, I can start grinding it to fit nicely. And that's going to be the goal for the time being. And I think that's going to be what I do for the rest of the day until it gets dark. Yeah, I'll bring you back in when this thing is tacked in and mostly ground into place. I got it patched in and fully welded up and ground down all the way across. I'm still missing the support piece that goes directly behind here. It goes from the main center to the side and just reinforces this bottom section and boxes it in even more. But I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be adding that when this thing comes off for welding up the hoops and everything else. I just wanted to show some progress right here, how it's ground nicely. And you might ask, why did I take the effort to actually cut this out, patch this in, and make it look decent, and when I could have just mounted this thing onto the mounts once they got repaired and just send it? One of the things is, if the bumper is actually compromised in its structural integrity, it's not as strong as it could be, and you need to take a hit. With this bumper, I want this to be able to hold. So that's the main reason why. Besides cosmetic reasons, that's the main reason. Other than that, I didn't have any issues with the rest of the bumper having small divots or dents. It's still fine for the most part. It's just that actually took a crack. It split the panel itself, so it no longer had structural integrity, and I wanted to make sure that was there. And that was the main reason why I decided to do this entire endeavor, and it took a decent amount of time to get this to this point.
And speaking of structure, I decided to make the bottom rib right now rather than later, just to get it out of the way.
Alright, so I got this thing welded in and ground down for the most part. I did put a coat on the back side previously of just undercoat, or just undercarriage spray, so that it wouldn't rust, because in California it's currently right around February and we're getting our winter storm, so I'm trying to prevent as much rust as possible before I actually get to spraying this thing with some, recoating this entire thing with some bed liner and getting it all uniform look. But yeah, this thing's pretty much done and ready to get mounted up to the actual 4runner. Now I'm just gonna get it completely scuffed down with some 80 grit all over and start bedlining this whole thing. Now switching it over to the mounting side of things, here are the mounts that I have. These mounts were used on the bumper on the previous rig, but these things also were used up during the accident. They have deformities and are basically crushed. They did their job in what they were supposed to do. So what the game plan is, I'm going to cut out this entire crush can portion so that I have a relatively flat bumper and frame side portions of the mounts so that I can now weld them onto this 2x4 rectangular tube. It should provide enough structural integrity between these two portions that I can use the winch and the bumper for their intended purposes. Now, the reason why I went with a 2x4 rectangular tube is generally, from all the pictures and all the measurements I could get from other mounts, is that the section between these two is roughly 4 inches. That's the reason why I went with a 4-inch wide rectangular tube. And being a 2-inch is mainly because the sections that are going to be staying are roughly 2 inches wide. And that's pretty much the second portion to why I use a 2-inch by 4-inch rectangular tube. Now going to the actual mounts and where I'm going to be cutting. I have figured out that it's going to be roughly along this line of axis and here as well. I'm just going to take an angle grinder with a cutting wheel and basically score this line and keep going until these things are cut completely off, and then hopefully everything is still square and I can just tack and weld everything into place. It's the next day. I got everything pretty much welded up and put together, and this is the end result that I was trying to get to. Basically, it is what I was saying earlier. Cut out the center portion which was used up in the accident, and then weld everything else onto the 2x4 tube, and then have a good solid structure for everything to be mounted on. I ended up just welding everything together and grinding it down as much as I could in a flat way. I know there's still some imperfections here, but for the most part this is going to be a very strong mounting point now. If I did everything correctly, this should be just like I'm mounting a undamaged mount to the bumper. However, I forgot that I still need to get the bolt through for the top, for the very front of the frame in this section, and be able to put a wrench on it. I couldn't do that with the previous opening, so what I basically did was notch it out and open it up a little bit more. I'm gonna get a grinder and clean up some of these edges and then reprime everything so that it won't be rusty and I can just basically send it. But yeah, this is basically what I wanted to do with the bumper mounts. So with the bumper and the mounts fixed up and ready, it's time to move on to the actually move on to the 4runner itself and remove the bumper. I'm not going to show you how to remove the bumper. There's a dozen other videos that are going to do better than I will in explaining how to remove it, but it's just basically removing 2 bolts on either side, anything else that's mounted, the wiring, and there's supposed to be a bolt here that goes into the body or connects to a support from the bumper, but this vehicle apparently never had it, and it goes the same for the other side, on the passenger side. So for me, it's just gonna be removing these 2 bolts on the driver's side and do the exact same process on the passenger side, and then after that removing the recovery or tow points right here and on the driver's side, or on the passenger side, excuse me.
And like I said, removing the bumper is a cakewalk. It's simple and it's pretty straightforward.
So I got the bumper off and this is what it is looking like. Again, like I said, there doesn't seem to be a crash bar in the middle, so what I'm just gonna do is see if I can, well, it looks like I can actually almost break these things off if I hit them hard enough. But what I'm gonna do is get a hacksaw and not an angle grinder just to cut the horns off so that I have a clear understanding what's here, and then from there I can just grind away what is stopping the mounts from getting on, and that's basically what I'm going to be doing. Okay, I have now cut the frame horns off, and it's pretty clean for the most part. I do need to grind off the weld tabs and clean these edges off because it is sharp. Now I'm just gonna clean them up and remove the tie down / recovery points on these things, and basically get it ready so I can get this thing in position. I got the frame horns cleaned up a little bit. I am eventually gonna make a plate to fit this and then weld it in and cover the gaps so that this is actually boxed in and reinforced, and I don't have to worry about this part failing, as well as having the actual mounts wrap around it and give it some extra structural reinforcement. So that's what I'm going to be doing to clean these up, but I'm going to be doing that after I get everything fitted and make sure that all the hard work I've been putting in to salvage this mount and salvage this bumper isn't all for naught. So I'm gonna do that after. I'm gonna be doing that after I make sure everything I've been doing works out correctly the way that I think it is. So on the side that I actually mounted, it's basically like mounting an undamaged ARB bumper. Hopefully I have everything mounted up. I am going to basically be doing a dry fit and then putting the bumper on to see how it actually fits onto the rig. I know how everything's fitting, how it's gonna work, and as well as get a sort of an idea of how big the hoops I want, or at least how big the hoops that I'm going to be making are. I have a estimate right now, but I want to see what the estimate is going to look like when the bumper is on, and that's basically what I'm going to be doing. So good news, the bumper is mostly on and it fits rather well. The bad news is the 2x4 tube that I used is just slightly too thick. The tube is slightly too thick. It is blocking the bumper from fully seating further back. So what I'm thinking I might have to do is cut the tube a little bit and cut that portion off. It won't be that hard, to be honest. And then recess that material inwards and weld it back up. But for the time being, while it's up here, it is roughly in the same spot on both sides. What I'm going to do is get measurements for the hoop or the hoops and get them in place so that I have a rather good understanding of how everything is going to fit. The main hoop, I'm believing it's going to be right in line with the grill so that it has the same shape and the same profile, that it's just going to be right here, and push it forward a little. And I do believe I am going to add the hoops on the sides. I'm going to be adding the hoops on the sides again, so it's going to probably go where the original hoops started, right around here in the corner. Hoop up and go down so that it matches the same profile here. And I'm going to weld it onto the vehicle, so weld it on. So that's what I'm going to be up to, and that's what I'm going to do before I take this thing off, so that at least I have that in place and I don't have to necessarily worry about that anymore. This is an update of where the bumper is currently. We have the hoops bent up and fully welded in. They are all the way welded in. And this isn't going to go anywhere for the most part. I still am thinking I'm going to be adding some supports to the back here, just so to give it a little bit more structural support, just in case we do actually hit an animal. This isn't going to flex or bend inwards. But the hoops are in. I got the exterior ones as far out as possible so that the turn signals aren't as impaired as much as I can get them. Right now I'm going to be putting these tabs on here, roughly like so that I can hang the lights here instead, putting them further out. but still keeping them in the general same area. The main reason we're going to be doing that is because we're going to be opening the top right here because we want to have access to the engage or disengage lever for the winch that we're going to be putting inside. Because while this bumper is amazing from its natural state, ARB did make it slightly inconvenient to access the levers, because the ways to access the levers, regardless of what winch you have, is they want you to clock it and have it right here or here, because there are little slits right here that to access them. However, if you're in a pinch or in a rush, having to bend down in front of your vehicle is kind of inconvenient instead of just having it on top. However, for convenience sake and not wanting to actually kneel down, we're gonna open up the top so that we can get to the winch on top. Moving on from that though, the actual control box is still going to be on top, but I'm going to use a mount from one of our other ARB bumpers for the control box unit so that I can fab something up and have it mounted here and have it secure. But other than that, that's pretty much it for the bumper. Everything is welded. Going to cut a hole here, going to weld on these tabs. The only other thing that I wanted to update on is that the mounts have been quote unquote fixed. It just needed another flat side so that it can slide into position. I know this might have been overkill for the amount that I did, but I didn't want to redo it more than once, so here it is. I just cut 2 inches off and then made it as flat as possible in line with the actual mounting surface. So that's what I have here. Hopefully this is going to be enough and I don't have to remodify it again. And I think it's going to be enough. But now moving to the actual vehicle. The caps are welded in, they are boxed in. So this should be stronger than just having it completely open. So, and voila, she is painted up and ready for install. Minus the hole on top that we're gonna get to in a bit, I'm gonna be doing a dry fit on the rig just to make sure the mounts work now and this thing fits. Other than that, the hoops are in, painted up, the tabs are in, painted up, the little corner lights are in. We're gonna wire them up in a bit. Everything is basically ready to go on this thing. And moving to the vehicle itself, the mounts are now installed. I'm gonna hope everything fits, and we're gonna do a dry fit right now and make sure everything is good. The bumper's on now and it fits where it's supposed to. I would be lying if I said it fit the second time I tried it. No, it didn't. We had to take it off again because there was a clearance issue on the mounting plate on the inside here, touching where the 2x4 was. So I decided just to trim it off a little. I'll be recoating that when it gets off again to mount the winch. But yeah, this entire thing is mounted and pretty much set to go. I just need to install the bolts and everything else. I don't really have a complaint on what I've done. It has the full hoops that guard the entire grille and the headlights. The fog lights are in. The driving lights are going to be installed in a bit. The fog lights here that are currently on the grille are going to be removed. The winch is going to be installed when this thing comes back off. It's going to be the winch off of the Suburban because the Suburban's getting a brand new winch and the old winch there is going to come in here, because for the life of us, having a newer winch on the Suburban would be much better used than having a older winch that was from the previous owner of that bumper be mounted there. So that old winch is coming onto this bumper and it'll be used as a secondary winch. It's still another 12K winch that's going to be mounted on the Suburban, so it's not going to be bad. We just wanted to have a newer winch for the Suburban in the event that anything does happen, and having the second and having it here is just having the old winch here is not going to be that bad, because this is just more or less a daily. We don't really off-road with this. We just wanted to give it the off-road treatment that a 3rd gen 4runner deserves. So yeah, we're gonna take this thing off again, recoat everything, install the bumper, install the lights that we have for the front, and then I'll bring you back when it's pretty much all set. Or maybe I'll bring you back when the rest of the build on this thing is done. But for the most part, this thing is done. Now that we built this bumper, let's go over it for a second. The bumper is fully dressed now as it is, but what we've done is put hoops onto the front of the bumper so that the grille and the headlights and the hood are protected. We've made the hoops in a slight angle so that if we do have an animal strike, it goes underneath the vehicle and not over. We also cut an opening on top of the bumper so that we can actually access the lever for the winch. I don't know if we're going to be adding a larger opening in total so that we can add or be able to access any winch that we have here now, but it's not out of the cards. We have the winch installed with a aluminum fair lead, and it's mounted a synthetic cable to a D-ring just to have it secure. The license plate is in. We do have our pod lights here. We haven't wired them up, but they are basically ready to go to replace the former fog lights that we have up here on the grill. We fixed up the mounts so that everything fits onto the 4runner now. The mounts have been reinforced as well, and everything on this bumper is pretty much set as it's going to be. Albeit we might add a few more lights here and here, but that is at a later point, so not to worry about that. As well as we're missing a few antenna here for either CB or ham or GMRS radios, but again, that's a later point. We just need the bumper to have the ability to have them at that later point. But the main reason I did this project was so that this 4runner actually has protection to itself and have the ability to recover itself, or be an asset to a recovery that's ongoing. The second main reason that I did this project was so that I can do a proof of concept that it is feasible to honestly take a bumper from a wrecked vehicle that is damaged or has been used already and abused, and honestly put it back into a situation where you can honestly foreseeably use it reliably again. Because when we started, this thing did not have hoops and the mounts were damaged. The crush cans were used on the mounts. They were spent mounts. But this is a proof of concept that is feasible for anyone to actually do. But all in all, it wasn't that bad. Everything fits well now. It fits really well, as you can see, and it's going to be a usable performer. And that was the first thing we wanted to do with the 4runner. And that's pretty much this project done. And let's talk about the next project that we're about to start. These sliders. But that's going to be an entire video on itself. So until next time, be safe and tread lightly.